This is the Karl Gerber workplace lawyer person, and I'm here to tell you that the show, which is normally heard from 7 to 8 p.m. on Sunday, is now going to be heard from 7 to 8 p.m. on Saturday on the same Kabc Am790 station. So this is a very important announcement about the Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show. As you may know, KABC is broadcasting the USC games, and the USC games are on Saturdays. So if there's a USC game that starts kind of late in the afternoon until December, the show may be heard at its regularly scheduled time at 7 o'clock on KBC 790 on Sunday. But normally, until December, it will be heard on Saturday from 7 to 8 p.m. So if you're confused about this, and I think a lot of people are, including myself, you might want to stream the show on YouTube on this very channel. Otherwise, we will be providing notifications on workplacelawyer.org. That's workplace, all one word, lawyer.org, which will have announcements about when the show will be heard. This is very exciting that we are moving to Saturdays because the Saturday spot from 7 to 8 p.m. on 790 has about 5 times as many listeners as our Sunday spot had. And that's if you have a dead show that nobody listens to, but the Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show is actually a show that a lot of people listen to on the radio, actually even more on the internet, but there have been times when we've had significant ratings even on the Sunday spot. So we're very happy and excited about this, and thank KBC for giving us a chance to really show who we are and get a lot of new listeners listening on Saturdays. Sometimes there'll be a USC game broadcast on Saturdays, and we'll come on right after the game's done and the post-game conversations are done, and there are going to be a lot of people that were listening to the USC game. So that will be added listeners for the show and exceptional numbers under those circumstances. Otherwise, it will just be 7 to 8 on Saturdays, KBC AM 790. You also can pick up the show on YouTube on this channel and approximately 20 sound sharing sites that exist. There are so many sound sharing sites this show goes out to, I don't even know what all of them are. I've come across this show on a sound sharing site in Poland, and they have subscribers and followers for the sound sharing site in Poland that plays this show. We have a program that we use, and when we upload a show, when we get it from the station on Mondays after it's cleaned up, not the live stream version, it just goes out automatically to all these sound sharing sites. There are tons of them. FM Player, there's iTunes, there's SoundCloud, which is the KBC one. There's a lot of background noise right now in this room, and I apologize. I have some very rambunctious children in here, and some of them are not even children. What are these noises? What are you crunching? Well, if you can hear him, yeah, it doesn't sound too good. Could you actually stop doing that? It's really annoying, and we're trying to. Now there's somebody on a treadmill. This is incredible, absolutely incredible. So, as I'm telling you, and I'm going to raise my voice a little bit because there's a lot of background noise, we may start broadcasting this show not live, but we may do it in a studio on days other than Saturday nights because it's not easy to get people to come into the studio on Saturday nights. And if we do that, the show may be an even higher production quality with layered sound in the background, music playing, sound effects, not done by me. As you know right now, I do my own sound effects. It seems like that children in this room are trying to make the most amount of noise possible. I can't do this with these people in this room. And this is why it's best to do a show in a studio, because sometimes people think it's funny to do interference like that. And it's really hard to do what you want to be doing when you're talking on the radio or in a show. It's totally not. Listen to that. Totally unprofessional. You know, I work with some of the best talent in the industry, these voice actresses. Tonight we're going to have a very famous one on, maybe you'll recognize her voice from a cartoon. But these shows are scripted by me. It takes a lot of time, and I don't think anyone else could script them. I do it every week, and then we have very experienced voice actors along with me on the show. So because we're going to have a slightly different audience now listening to the show on Saturdays, maybe they don't listen on Sundays, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to have the show start off a little bit more serious, and it's going to have tonight a discussion about AB5, which you've probably heard about. It's a new gig economy law, and now it has actually been signed into law by Governor Newsom, and it's Labor Code Section 2750.3. And Ann Gullister, who's one of the lawyers who works in my office, will be on the first 12 minutes of the show talking about what this new law is and how it's going to affect you and everyone else, and why it was passed, and who is not a part of it, because there are some groups of employees who are not going to be covered by this AB5. There's some carve-outs and exceptions, like real estate agents don't automatically become employees merely because they're working in a real estate office, where the real work that goes on there obviously is, selling real estate. It's just public policy that those people will not be considered employees. So we're going to talk about that law for about 12 minutes to break in those new listeners, because KBC has a lot of very educated listeners that are genuinely listening to get information, and they have a very high threshold of how much information, how sophisticated they want it, and they really enjoy the focused kind of shows that come on the weekend by professionals that have special information, including me. But after 12 minutes, we're going to move on to the usual sketch comedy. And we call it sketch comedy because they're comedy sketches that I write, and we're going to have a voice actress in it, and it's going to be funny. And it's going to help you understand how the gig economy works and how this new law works. So I strongly encourage you to listen tonight from 7 to 8. KBC, that's AM790 in Los Angeles. It goes from Ventura County all the way through San Diego and Riverside County and San Bernardino County too. So you can listen just by listening to the radio. You can listen on YouTube like you're doing right now. You might be able to listen on the KBC website, because they have a way of listening on the internet if you're not in the bandwidth of the station. But I understand it's a little bit more complicated to listen through the KBC website. And if you don't have a radio, you should get one. There's a lot of quality programming on, even if it isn't KBC. There's a lot of quality programming. And it's important to have a radio. And what I'm hearing is that if there were earthquakes and things like that, the AM signal would still be transmitting on a battery-operated radio. Your computer, your phone, your internet connection might not be working, but the AM signals would be. So they're very important. And I also just want to mention, I know a lot of young people think it's only cool to listen if it's called a podcast. And so you can call us a podcast because we're up all over the internet, more than most shows are up on the internet, and we live stream and all that. But the truth is, there are a lot of people listening on the radio. And what's exciting about this new time from 7 to 8 on Saturdays that KBC is willing to do for us, because they believe in the show and they want to get even more people listening. This show may be on after a USC football game. And if that happens, there's an increased number of people listening to the station, because there's a lot of USC football fans in Los Angeles and the Southern California area. And then they'll stick around, they'll hear the show. And what I've heard is 6 years ago, when KBC used to broadcast the Dodgers, they had 1 million people listening a day. I don't know if it's quite as many for the USC games, but it's a lot. And so by me being on right after those USC games from 7 to 8 on Saturdays, we're going to have the peak audience of KBC Los Angeles. And that's a little bit scary for me, because, we've had ratings on Sunday from 7 to 8. They've been very good. Actually, our highest ratings were over the holiday season last year. But the number of people that could be listening after a USC game is absolutely tremendous. And the number of people that will be listening just because of this new time slot is also tremendous. So this is a great opportunity to get this show really heard in Los Angeles because it's a very unique show that we do. It is comedy. It is comedy with a little bit of employment law. It's very much over the top comedy, and it's very, very funny. A lot of the comedy you hear nowadays is just a bunch of bad words, and it's really not funny. But what I do is far out. You're going to hear about Remus Helms, the man who made his fortune when his genital got infringed. Nizuki, the neuro nurse who has a clinic, and really it's in Reseda, not Tarzana. And she gets involved in some crazy things. And Cindy D, the phone sex operator. And Tonight, the animal lover working for the gig economy. So you're going to hear it all. And these characters are really very, very different. And the way that they come across is not so much different sometimes than the litigants in these cases and the adverse witnesses that expect you to believe really ridiculous and crazy things. So tonight, 7 to 8, Saturday night is the show. If the show is not on Saturday from 7 to 8 until December, it's going to be on Sundays from 7 to 8 because there are going to be days where there's a USC football game and going to interrupt the show. Now, I'm doing this live from Studio City, California with a bunch of annoying kids walking in and out of the room, and I guarantee you that the show won't sound like this tonight when I'm in the Culver City studio. In just a couple hours now, it'll be its usual high production quality in the studios where they rent out to Podcast 2, Cumulus is our station, and they own Westwood One, and KOS is still in the same building with me. But they're going to be moving out because they were bought out by, I believe, Lieberman Broadcasting. So we've got a bunch of radio stations that broadcast out of where we do for Cumulus, and we've got a bunch of blank studios in there where the podcasters rent out that space for $7.50 an hour. And at the studio, you don't hear crunching noises like that. That's not good, what you're hearing. Someone's in this room making noise. And so even if there was a crunching noise in the studio, if you're like a couple feet away from it, it doesn't get picked up. Not even a couple feet. If someone were to cough sitting next to me, it doesn't get picked up on the microphone in the studio. So that's a lot of extraneous noise you're hearing. They're unprofessional amateurs in this room right now, for lack of a better word, and they just don't get it. But not that way over at the studio, and we're gonna. What was that? I mean, this is totally out of place. I mean, Jesus, we're having a serious broadcast here. People want to know about this new time. Well, you don't want to know. You don't care, but the listeners of Los Angeles do. And the future of comedy and comedy radio depends on the success of this show at this point, because there's nothing else like this being broadcast. And I know that there's a competitor station called KCRW, and they have a show called The Moth, which is not like mine, but it is a show where it's like old-time radio and it's being acted out, and there are 1 million people listen to that every week. But that show is on 450 stations, and I can guarantee you that if I was on 450 stations with a Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer show, we'd have a lot more than 1 million people listening, because we have more than a couple thousand people listening to every one of these shows on the radio. So this new time should allow exposure to the show for a new group. But if we're not on a Saturday, we'll be on Sunday. I encourage you to tune in tonight from 7 to 8, AM790, Los Angeles, for a great show, and it's going to be funny. After the first 12 minutes of serious legal content, you might hear someone whispering over here. If you can't hear it, then maybe it's just my imagination. So tonight, 7 to 8, Saturdays. If we're not on Saturdays, we're on Sundays until the month of December, in which the show is permanently 7 to 8 on Saturday. Tune in tonight. Thank you for listening to the live stream.